Senator Iowans, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, glad to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So what is transactional gold?
Well, it's really pretty quite simple. We currently have a currency, the U.S. dollar. It was backed by gold back in the day. Well, think back to when our country started. It was gold and silver coin was, and going back all the way back till biblical times, that was money. We now have a system that's transactional, outside of, completely divorced or disconnected from gold and silver, right? That's what the U.S. dollar is. It's a fiat currency. It's a currency that's used, until recently, it's thought of as cash. So you think printed dollar bills, but it's really become a digital thing more than anything, right? It's just a notional thing. But it's fiat in the sense that there's really no constraint on how many dollars can be created. So a transactional gold or constitutional currency, maybe another way to describe it, is a back to the future approach at the state level, another way to basically use money instead of it being completely fiat. It's like, I think of it as an optional alternative for Iowa citizens or maybe citizens of the United States. But the way it would work is the state would declare, based on Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution, where it says no state shall use anything but gold and silver coin as legal tender for the payments of debts. So it's this double negative provision of the U.S. Constitution. That's really the framework for this, right? That's the provision that is being used to define it. But it would implement something like the Glint Pay system. Maybe Glint Pay could actually be used to implement it. But how it would work is the state would declare there is a currency. We have a currency that is 100% backed by gold and silver. So going back to the way it worked originally. And the state would have a vault. We'll just describe it in general terms, right? The state has a vault that can store gold and silver. Citizens put money into the currency, and the state is obligated by contract, it's a contract, if you will, that money minus whatever transaction fee there would be, let's just call it 1%, just for sake of argument. That's probably somewhere in the ballpark, plus or minus. So you put in $100, they are obligated at the current spot price for gold or silver, depending on which you have specified. They would buy $99 worth at that time and store and secure gold or silver on your behalf. So it's stored in your account. It's your silver. It's your gold. But it's in the vault that the state is maintaining and making sure is safe and insuring it as well. What makes it transactional? So that's the gold part, right? So it's a currency that you can participate in, and it's backed by gold. And it's fee-based, right? So it's not like, so the state in the end, it might generate some revenue through this, but it's not really about the state. That's not the point. The point is it's a currency backed by gold or silver. But what makes it transactional is that you can spend it in real time for dollars in the economy, just like you currently do. So essentially, like today we bought lunch. I bought lunch, you bought lunch, and we both, at least I paid with a credit card. What happened was I gave them my credit card, they looked at my information, and they figured out the amount, and then that came out of my dollar account at whatever bank is associated, or in my case, a credit card, right? I incurred a debt that I have to pay at some point in the future. With a transactional gold system or a constitutional currency in Iowa that's backed by gold, when you go to a vendor and you make a purchase, you would give them a debit card. Many people use debit cards right now with dollars, and the vendor would, it's a $15 meal, you give them the card, it then goes through the MasterCard network just like it currently does. But instead of going to your bank and saying, hey, take so many dollars out of your account, notional, virtual, digital dollars, the bank, or in this case, it wouldn't be a bank, it would be the state, and the vault, or the people running the vault on behalf of the state and that system would say, we need $15 worth of gold. So whatever that is, like a gram of gold. We need that gram of gold. So they'll decrement your gold, turn it into dollars, pay the vendor. The vendor takes the money as they don't, it's completely transparent to the vendor. They've been paid in gold in real time at spot price minus that transaction fee. So
when you say at spot price, what do you mean?
So just like corn or soybeans, right? There is a price every day that's constantly fluctuating. How much is a bushel of corn or a barrel of oil? That's established through the market. So that's basically what I would call spot price. So what is the current value in the market for whatever thing we're talking about? In this case, we're talking gold and silver. There is a dollar value for an ounce of gold or an ounce of silver, and it's constantly fluctuating based on the market. So we would be using that market price as the value of the currency. Basically, you're storing it in gold, but people generally want to know, what is my X worth in dollars? And that's what it would be.
So, I thought it was interesting over lunch. You mentioned this is kind of back to the future, right?
Yep.
This isn't a new concept. This is what we used to do back when we actually had gold backing our dollar, right? It was always transactional gold. So what happened, and can you give us a little history lesson around that? What happened, and how has that kind of derailed our system and messed up our complete system right now?
Yeah, well, I would argue, so it was always, gold and silver was transactional. Before a country started, people are going all the way back to biblical times, the Roman Empire. They would define a currency. In this case, the dollar, or the dollar, is it was a foreign currency that we use basically initially as our currency. And it was a coin that you could split into pieces. Think of a pie scored for 8 pieces. So you could break it into 8 pieces, and that became what was called a bit. So you could break that apart, and that's how far you could break apart a gold coin, or maybe a silver coin would work similar. But it wasn't, and I guess because of the value and because that was the only currency, people paid with that, and that was, think of like the penny. That'd be the smallest division, and a small silver coin would have been the equivalent of like a penny. And so that made it transactional, and it was a currency. But because you're actually storing that intrinsic value in the coin itself, there are some concerns or risks or disadvantages to using it that way, because you're carrying the value of your resource in your pocket or in your satchel or whatever, however you're carrying or transporting that gold and silver. So I would say that was always kind of a downside. That's all they had. There was no electronic network. There weren't all these other things that we've had. And I would say those are advantages that we've had and that's one of the reasons how we've ended up. And I think there's the velocity of money, how fast it exchanges and moves through the economy, is something I think we've really been able to benefit from. And I think it's been a natural progression to take advantages of all the technology and interconnectedness in the economy and everything. But that doesn't mean you have to abandon the non-fiat nature of gold and silver in the process, right? That's the part where we've lost. The transactional part that we've gained with digital dollars or cash or positive. But just like with other empires, when they had coin, they would go through this process of debasement. So you take a coin that was, I'm going to give just a hypothetical, or you have a coin that's 50% silver. And it's worth, people recognize this is a 50% silver coin. And that's how it had its value, and that's how it was traded. And we debase our currency today because now we have severed the link to gold and silver or anything tangible. But back then, when it was actually a silver coin or a gold coin, they would lower the content from 50 to 40, 40 to 30. And pretty soon, and what happens then? The king who makes those decisions basically would say, well, okay, the new coin is this. And they would now they'd have more coins for the same amount of silver. They'd dole it out to their friends. Their friends would get the biggest advantage. They would buy up the hard assets. And that's inflation, right? You've basically created the amount of currency respective to the tangible asset. So that's the process, and that's the downside to it becoming a fiat currency. So we were lurching towards that. We have been lurching towards that for a long time. And the last straw, or the last step in that, was in 1971 when Nixon basically temporarily said we are going to no longer be convertible to gold. And that goes, we could talk about that story, but that was the last step. So from that point forward, we entered into the dollar became the U.S. reserve currency tied to oil, or the petrodollar. And there hasn't been, and if you listen to the various central bank, like your Greenspans or some of these, the people that are in charge of the central bank or the Federal Reserve, they basically admit, we just print money out of thin air, and they're not constrained any longer by the relationship between the dollar and tangible assets.
So you've submitted some legislation the last 2 sessions, or?
Correct.
Okay, and what would the legislation do?
I guess I would say there's really 2 components to it, but at its heart, it is declaring that the state will build a transactional currency system. And part of that, it's inherent in that you're declaring there's a currency 100% backed by gold and silver, laying on top of that U.S. Constitution provision. So the state would basically have a vault that they contract. There'd be a system like a Glint. And Glint could actually build it as a company because I know the CEO of Glint. I've met him several times. And he, as one entity, is very open to and would offer to build that system. Now, it's a fee-based system, so the state would be basically the bill would say we're going to implement defining a currency. It's backed by gold and silver, and so it would be a transactional system so that people could put money in, have the money stored, and the state is basically taking on that infrastructure role of storing and defending people's wealth, right? So the bill that I presented was basically it was based on some model legislation that came from, it's in the back of the Pirate Money book, Kevin Freeman's book. So it was based on the model, and that bill had been introduced in Texas 2 or 3 years, maybe the year before I introduced it. There have been so this bill has, or something like this bill has now passed in these last 2025 legislative session in multiple states, has passed in 5 states now. And all those bills are different, but they're all at least have various components of the same concept.
So how would the transaction work under these laws? Or I guess, how would this benefit individuals or Iowa citizens, this new system? And is this something, and it would be obviously optional, some option they could, put their money into the gold-backed currency, spend it anywhere they want in the world, and then, or they could still have money in a regular bank and things like that.
Yeah, so the expectation would be people today, I mean, myself included, I don't know if you do, but many people they try to have a diverse portfolio, right? They want to have money in stocks. They want to have money in bonds. They want to have money in real estate. Of course, your house, people increasingly think of that as an investment. But people, I think often, it's really a good idea to be diversified, including having some money in tangible assets like gold and silver. So I would venture to bet that a significant percentage of Iowans have money in gold and silver, but that's not an easy thing to do. And the lower you are in the economic strata, I mean, just if you don't have a certain amount of means, that's virtually impossible to do at a competitive, fair way. I mean, it's just I've bought gold and silver. I generally buy and haven't sold. It's much harder to sell, and it's hard to buy without paying a significant premium and paying, either taking the risk of where is it stored or paying money to have it stored. So that's, I think, really at the heart of this is why I think it's advantageous to have something in place like a currency at the state level, and why many states are at least pursuing the concept. People that own land, people that own a business, people that just have means enough to keep a substantial amount of money in the stock market, that investment is going to track inflation. Whereas the average person, if you don't have those means or that ability, it's like you have a bank account, maybe it's paying, I don't know, let's say you have it in a money market, you're getting 3% interest or 3.5%. Inflation is generally significantly higher than that inflation rate. So every day, it's like having a bank account and there's a hole and it's just dripping out of the bottom, maybe running out of the bottom. That's the account of the average person, especially the lower 2/3 of the economy. This basically gives everyone that opportunity to put some of their resources into a tangible asset. And the state is basically facilitating that. You're really just taking on, it's like, I think of it as infrastructure. You're making it so the average person can do that. They don't have to go to all the trouble of where do I buy it? How do I make sure it's the right material, it's actual real gold or silver? How do I store it? How do I secure it? And then how do I liquidate it if I actually need it in an emergency or I just want to use it for something?
How are you currently taxed on gold if you try to sell it versus how this system would work?
Well, currently, gold and silver would be considered a capital asset. So the U.S. dollar is a currency. It's taxed on the interest that it earns, and they treat that as income. Whereas, like if you buy some land or you buy office equipment or something that depreciates, you pay capital gains, or say you buy stock. If you buy stock and when you sell it, you're going to pay capital gains on the growth. That's the way gold, because gold and silver currently is not recognized as legal tender. It's not a currency. It will be taxed as a capital gain. But on top of that, because gold, this is a federal government definition, gold and silver is regarded as a collectible asset, which means I think the capital gains, the nominal capital gains rate is 20%, and I think the capital gains percentage on precious metals is 28%. So there's a capital gains implication, and simply by virtue, because I think in reality, a transactional gold system is just as transactable as the dollar is right now. It absolutely fully meets the definition of a functional transactional currency. So if the state made that declaration, I think you make it a usable system, and just inherently you've declared it to not be subject to capital gains tax. Now that in the end, the courts will weigh in on that, and we'd see how that all plays out. But I don't think that's the primary point is to have a currency that actually has integrity, a system that's in place. Because I think there are some real threats that are out in front of us. I mean, we see the debt, we see again that growing wealth divide between essentially the have and the have-not. So people in the lower half of the economy, their income is growing far slower than inflation, and they fall farther and farther behind. And then we end up with these solutions where the government says we're going to subsidize you. And that just simply makes them more dependent. It's just a vicious cycle.
Yeah, you'd mentioned over lunch how the current system has favored the ultra, the 1% or the higher, income brackets versus like the middle class, where our current system, our wealth has been pretty flat or on a downturn, but up on an upturn the other way. How would this make that different?
Well, the principle, and it goes back, I think it's a French economist, and his name is Cantillon. And so there is a principle that he defined, the Cantillon principle. And it goes back to, again, the example of a king having currency, and when he debases that currency, he creates more coin for the same amount of resource. And that goes to the people closest to him or her, right? And so now they have this currency in their hand. And what will they do with it? They'll go out and they'll buy tangible assets. Well, the person selling the tangible assets will be the rank and file. Those that have not yet had, they're not going to buy it from each other. They're going to buy it from the people that hold these tangible assets. And so they trade it for dollars, or they trade it for the currency. And those hard assets change hands. And by the time that money trickles down to the rank and file, it's really lost its purchasing power. They've given up their asset, and now they hold these dollars that have been diluted. And that same principle comes into play. If you look there's a chart of the inflation, the amount of dollars, which is inflation, that are in circulation. And if you look at the net worth of the top individuals in the economy, their net worth is, it's not just a straight line, but it's very strong correlation. Their net worth is basically tracking inflation. But if you look at the bottom, I don't know, it's like 80-90% of the country, their actual purchasing power, or how many resources they truly hold, is a much lower curve. And so that spread between the two, it's just getting higher and higher all the time. And so that really creates that gap. But the thing that I think we really do need to consider is, you've heard the term central bank digital currency.
Sure.
So I don't know what are your thoughts on what the central bank digital currency is, or is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Good question. I mean, I'd advocate to you on that.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious. I'm always curious what people's thoughts are or understanding.
But digital currency for
central bank digital currency, the CBDC. It's a concept we've been here. Biden, he had implemented an executive order about CBDC.
Right, and that's the challenge with that is then the government has control of your wealth. And so they could say, oh, you've had your fill of bacon this month. Your money's no good for that. Or your social credit score is too low right now. You can't do whatever. So it's, I think, to me, when I hear that, it sounds like the government trying to control us even further and further.
Yeah, the credit score system that they've talked about in China for some time, right? Where they can they can set up their criteria to measure or to grade the average citizen, and then use the currency as a tool to coerce or change somebody's behavior.
Right.
And I think that's, I mean, we've heard that they've fully tested. They could pull the trigger on that today. China already has a system like that in place, so clearly it could be executed. And there's been legislation that passed at the federal level and we passed some stuff this last couple of years when we did the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code. That's really the code that defines how money is defined in the state and how the banking and all that stuff, how that works. That's in the UCC. So there were changes, and it's kind of stuff that comes down and generally just kind of gets passed. It's legalese and it's like an accountant stuff. But the one that came through this last time, it had some language that to me and some others was concerning, that it was kind of opening the door for a central bank digital currency. So I helped to get some changes in the UCC that did get passed last year, to try to stop that. And they passed something at the federal level to try to say, yeah, we're not going to do central bank digital currency. But it's still a threat. And you can see with the debt that is in front of us, I mean, literally our deficit, the country's deficit went up by, or the debt went up by $1 trillion in the last 2 months. So from August until October, it went up by another $1 trillion. So it went from 37 to 38 trillion. And so, I mean, on that trajectory, I mean, it is, we've hit the hockey puck or hockey stick thing where it's going almost straight up. So, but even if that doesn't happen, they just passed a thing called the Genius Act, and it is really trying to bring in something called, or build a framework for what they call stablecoin, which isn't a crypto. People, I think, get confused about that. But in the end, I feel like it's another way to do something like a corporate, more privatized equivalent of a central bank digital currency. And if we wait until conditions are such that that is projected as an inevitable, the only solution, it'll be too late to resist. And that's, I think, why this is so important to have built and defined a currency like this before, instead of waiting until basically the crisis is actually at our doorstep.
Well, to the average individual like myself, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, gold increases in value, our dollar decreases in value, or if we invest it in a money market or something like that, it barely increases in value if it does. So, I mean, I would say, yeah, sign me up. So what's the problem? What are the challenges with getting this legislation passed, or what have you faced in that realm of things?
Well, I think the biggest thing is why I think it's important to come here and talk with you and talk with other people. People, right. It seems like a foreign concept. We have been using the dollar in a digital way, and that's all anybody our ages and even older has ever really known. And I think people just have a hard time. It's not, as we've talked about, it's not that it's terribly complicated, but it takes some time to get people to reframe and it's a little bit of a different paradigm, right? It's like, oh, well, how can we use gold, or how would that work? And in the end, it's actually pretty straightforward. So I think knowledge is the biggest problem. Just getting people to understand that this is a system that can work and why there are advantages to it. And really, there aren't any real downsides. So I think there's some resistance that people think because it's different, it's going to somehow impact the banking system or other things like that. I think that is part of the group that has the biggest concern, is that, well, this is going to take money out of deposits in a bank. And so therefore it's going to be, there's going to be these negative impacts from that. But I guess the things I would say is that I don't foresee this, certainly not in the short term, but the objective is not where everybody puts their money, just stores it in a vault in a bank. It's having a currency that has integrity. And so just like I would recommend, and I'm not a financial advisor and everybody has to make those decisions on their own, but I wouldn't recommend that people put all their money into gold and silver, but I would advocate that people put some of their resources into gold and silver. And I think it's just it's a great, gold is always reviewed. It's always seen as a good kind of a contrarian investment. Utah put $120 million of their rainy day fund into gold like this last year. And when you look at how gold typically responds in a crisis or a downturn, it's often a very contrarian investment. And that investment for Utah has done really well. Because when you typically need the money, it's because things are tough, and the dollar and other investments are probably dropping, and often gold actually goes the other direction. So that's a really good reason. Just that in and of itself is helping Iowans have a reserve in something other than just being in the dollar, I think is a win. And helping people just to think in terms of it's really simple. It's really just because you can spend it, you can buy it. It can be all online. I think the banks could be a huge part of doing it, because a big part of this is the state taking on this role, and it really legitimizes it's a currency. But the states, because they have such a fundamental role in our economy and an important role in our economy, if you could go to the bank and you could start these, manage this resource, because banks hold gold. They can also store gold, because gold is a tier 1 asset, and central banks around the world hold it. So in the end, I think that there's always fear of the unknown. And in this case, I think there's a fair amount of unknown, but it's really, when you stop and think about it, it's not a scary thing. Storing things in gold, I think people have always understood that is something that has just inherent value.
Sure. Yeah. So some states have already passed laws, and they're on their way to making this happen. What would Iowa have to do to make this happen?
Well, yeah. So the bill, at least components of this bill, have passed in 5 states, and it's been introduced in a couple dozen. So really, I think about half of the country has had some type of legislation introduced. Some states have already passed identifying gold and silver as legal tender. And I think that isn't sufficient to make it a currency. It's a prerequisite. But I think if you pass the bill and put this system in place, you get a twofer. You just do it all in one fell swoop. And the beauty of it is, again, you could put out an RFP, and a company like Glint has already built it. I've used it myself. It is a fully functional, fully compliant, successful implementation of this model. They as an example could contract with a Brinks vault here in the state. They would stand up their system as the Iowa system, and the cost to the state would be negligible, because the thing is, their system, just like the state's would be, is funded by, it's a fee-based system. So if you put in $100, I think you end up with $99 worth of gold at the point of sale. And like in my example, it went from like $99 to $150 over the last year.
Wow.
Because of the decline in the dollar, which means that your gold goes up in value in dollars almost every day.
That's a huge increase.
It is. And that's obviously, our mileage will vary as we go forward. And like gold and silver, I mean, it really made the news here recently. Gold and silver have had these really significant, like 3, 4, 5% increases over the last few weeks. And it's retraced some. And there's some volatility, just like we're seeing volatility in a lot of markets, like the cattle market. The cattle market has had limit moves up and down in the last few weeks. So the markets are becoming more volatile. I think there's a lot more uncertainty. But that, again, is just an argument for using something tangible, proven, historic like gold and silver. And if you look at the trend over the long term, which is how people recommend you always do investments, gold and silver over the long term they've always done well.
So everyday action or everyday transactions would work just like normal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because again, you can use a debit card just like you do today. Absolutely digital. The vendor has no idea, or they don't care.
What if we run out of gold?
Well, I've heard that people ask me that before. It's like, well, how could this work? There isn't enough gold.
Right.
Well, first off, I don't know if people don't really understand the amount of gold. There's a lot of gold above ground. Gold it's such a unique, immutable substance, and that's what makes it. God has always talked about throughout the Bible. Money is always equated with gold and silver. So the amount of gold above ground, because that's refined, is a very large amount. And the amount of production every year is a very small fraction of that. But the question isn't, is there enough gold? Just like with Bitcoin, right? So I referenced that earlier. Bitcoin, what makes Bitcoin unique is that there will never be more than, I think, 21 million Bitcoin. So it's completely inelastic. It's a growing number because of how it's implemented, but you can't create them out of thin air, and there'll be a point in the not so far future where you're done. There'll be 21 million and that's it. Gold is something that grows kind of with the population because people are always looking for gold, finding gold, refining gold, or finding it and refining it. But it's a non-fiat thing. And when people think, well, maybe there isn't enough gold, the real issue is if that would ever happen, it simply means there's far too many dollars in circulation. That means the price of gold is too low for the amount of dollars that there are.
Right. Interesting. So are these bills mostly symbolic, or do they have a real chance of actually making and, turning into these viable everyday payment options? I mean, you said that it's been passed in other states. What's the timeline like? Is it something that Iowa could do and actually, within a few years have this system in place?
There's no reason, because there are functional systems that would just be recreated or established in the state, there's no reason you couldn't do this in a very short amount of time. It really just comes down to awareness and will. There's really not even, the risk would be borne more by the person standing up the system. If in fact, let's just back up. So Texas has been at the forefront of, they're a large state, they have a large economy. They built a number of years back a precious metal depository. Basically, it's a sophisticated, very highly secure vault made for storing precious metals. And now they've passed a bill that implements basically what I'm proposing, and I have been proposing in the state of Iowa. And they'll hopefully build it, I don't know, we'll see. Maybe they'll get it actually established over the next year. But they already have this vault, a sophisticated vault. But we don't actually have to have our own vault built and run by the state. We just need to have a vault to have this stuff stored that we can trust. A Brinks vault, part of a very robust system, could do that, and they already exist in the state. Glint, as an example, and I'm sure there'll be others that will come along, but I know for a fact, because I've used it myself, that's a system that already works and does most of all of what this currency would do.
So what exactly is Glint?
What Glint is exactly an implementation. It's an implementation, but it's not a currency. It's not in the states, and it's not at the state level. But they have a vault. It's in currently their vault is in Switzerland. They're adding, and they used to be gold. They've added gold and silver, so it basically has both of those components. They have a vault. They have a debit card where you put money in. They store gold or silver. You can spend it in real time, and you pay fees just like you would in the States. So they implement all of this. The one argument that people have made, both here and I've heard this argument in other states, is, well, why bother making a currency? Why not just use Glint or something like it? But capital gains is one reason. I mean, just that legitimacy. It's a state currency, but there are real benefits to it being established as an actual transactional currency. And I would much, much prefer that my resources be stored in the state. And I think it's the lowest form of government that can constitutionally define a currency like this is the state. And if every state did that, the state is so much more responsive. I mean, if you could do it at the county level, I'd probably advocate for that, but you can't, because the lowest constitutional entity that can do it is the state. And I think it's appropriate there because it would get I think it would be confusing if it was, say there were 99 of them across the state.
So what are the philosophical underpinnings of this, like decentralization of currency, individual sovereignty, that kind of thing? What are those? What does that look like? So
Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, they're all about this idea of decentralization. And this, in the end, it's centralized to the vault, right? That your gold will be stored in the vault. The system is run by the state. So it's not decentralized in that regard. Now, it's decentralized in the sense that your gold, your silver is stored in a state vault on your behalf. So it's decentralized to the individual. It's not like an ETF or some other mechanism that you can essentially hold a paper contract. It is actually your, what would be the right word? It's allocated and unsegregated gold and silver stored on your behalf. So it's decentralized that way. But it really, I view it as very much about individual sovereignty, because it's a currency that has integrity. You control that asset. And you basically have the advantage of, like the central bank, holding a tier 1 asset. You hold a tier 1 asset. The state is basically taking on the role of storing that for you. And if you wanted to, you could even basically fairly easily turn that into the gold at a point in time if you want to in the future. Like, I want to actually take possession of gold or silver. You could do that.
Interesting. Have you spoken to our governor about this?
I've talked to her. I've talked to her, the governor's team, and suggested the topic several times. It hasn't. I haven't. I guess I haven't since I've gotten a lot of interest in the topic so far. But I've heard comments from different people in leadership like, yeah, maybe you're a little ahead of your time when you introduced it a couple of years ago. We watch what's happening with the currency. We watch what's happening with the BRICS nations. We're watching what's happening with the price of gold. We're watching what's happening with just the uncertainty throughout the economy and the decline of the dollar. I mean, all of these things are happening literally as we speak. And I think it's raising awareness that things aren't just okay, and we probably need to be thinking outside the box. How do we actually protect our citizens, protect our wealth, and make sure that we're positioned to not fall prey or victim to what I see as kind of the nefarious objectives of people at the federal and beyond, at those higher levels.
Interesting.
To me, it's about individual and state sovereignty. It really is.
Right. And when you talk about nefarious objectives, what does that look like?
Well, I think, again, maneuvering towards where a central bank digital currency or some mechanism like that, where when you have people at the World Trade Organization or others basically saying, they're boasting about this will be programmable money, where we get to say how you use it, where you can use it, what the value of your account is. I mean, I think it sure feels to me like that with the debt and the credit-based system that we've become dependent upon, that we're way too vulnerable and to that type of manipulation and that type of what I would call nefarious objective.
Yeah, and that's the last thing we want.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the end of,
it's the end of freedom.
Right, it's the end of freedom. At some point they'll be saying, well, you can't travel 2 miles from your home. We're going to shut down whatever it is that they can do. But yeah, that's dystopian. The dystopian future that unfortunately is happening in some parts of the world.
Well, just in the last couple of weeks, England made it mandatory to have a digital ID.
Oh yeah, I'd heard about
just
that.
as one of several things that's happened. I mean, there are all kinds of crazy stuff happening in the UK right now, but that I think really goes to the heart of this whole, the government. If you have a digital ID, then that means that ID is going to be associated with almost everything that you possess or are connected with. Now they are going to have the ability to oversee, reach into, and control. I would argue almost every that's a fundamental part of this, and that's why I think it's just so important to find alternatives before it's too late.
So is this digital ID something you have to have on your phone?
Well, I'm not in England, thank goodness. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it can be on your phone. I mean, eventually it'll probably be something they embed under your skin. I mean,
like a chip. Wow.
But mandatory. I mean, I think it was in maybe Ireland or it was either Denmark or Norway. They made it optional. So they basically, but in UK, they said it is mandatory.
You watch those movies with the drones and they come flying up and they want to scan your ID or scan you or whatever else. It was we had our men's group yesterday morning. You had joined us a couple months ago, but we had a young guy who was in the military who they would drop him into different places, him and 3 other guys, and they would train troops. And he was talking about drone warfare and how drones are really changing warfare. And then we had the Dallas County Sheriff there, and he talked about drones and how, police departments are using drones now and sheriff's departments, which, they're very helpful if they can go out and see that there's no need for a police officer. They can save valuable time. They saved a woman's life who had mental illness that ran in -5 degrees or whatever, ran out into a field and they couldn't find her. Well, they sent the drone out and found her and saved her life. But, when we think about all these things, digital currency,
artificial
intelligence, drones in our everyday lives, and social credit scores and everything, it's like some crazy dystopian novel.
It is, and they're promoting these things as all positive. It's just simple progress,
safety.
And there are. I mean, you can do a lot of good things. I mean, I would argue like a lot, I think, frankly, a lot of the lies that have been propagated through our culture, if you took AI at the end of it is this large, massive data set that has been put into a condition, or basically it's been organized in a way that you can analyze it for deep, deep relationships between that data. And you basically build a neural network between all that data and all the players. And if you put that to work in an unbiased way without an objective in mind, it could really, I think, discover and expose the deceptions that have been put in place. That a lot of the paradigms that we accept as truth, they would be revealed, like whether it be personal medical freedom or all these things. We could really get to the truth. The problem is that these systems generally aren't unbiased. I mean, I think back, I'm going to use the example of, I don't know how far back it was. When we first heard the term, we'll just Google it, being synonymous with truth.
Right.
You remember, I don't know, it's in our conscious now, right? We just think of, well, do you want to get the truth? Do you want to get an answer? Just Google it or Siri it, right?
Right.
The problem is that's never been truth. Because, I mean, especially the idea that, I mean, you know this is true, but I tried to find stuff about, I don't know, vaccine injury or all kinds of topics. When you try to ask those questions throughout the last 5 years, you basically get a blank stare back from Google. It will not give you the answers that you know are there, that you saw before. So that's the thing that scares me the most, is just even about going back before the so-called AI, they just omit information. And that's data manipulation. That's not truth. If they can, because the scary thing is when you don't know what they haven't told you, how would you even discover it?
Well, and there was a movie called Died Suddenly, because right after they released the EUA shots for COVID, if you Googled died suddenly, you'd get this whole list of people that had heart attacks and strokes and issues, young people, et cetera, that had died suddenly. And then after they realized what was going on, you would Google that and you wouldn't find anything.
Exactly. And that I just use that as an example of how that's nefarious. I mean, that is quite evil when a search engine has been manipulated in a way. I think back to during the election cycle, the 2024 presidential election. I went into one of these ChatGPT or one of the AI search engines, and I asked questions about Donald Trump as a candidate, and the either said, "Well, I'm sorry, I can't answer that," or it was very negative. And then if you asked a similar question about Biden and then Kamala Harris, it came back with these very different glowing things. Or people that would say, "Well, we asked about the assassination attempts of Donald Trump," and he would say, "Oh, that didn't happen." I mean, that's clearly something you've manipulated the data set to give not a truthful answer, but a propagandist answer. Yeah. And so that's the thing that scares me is I think I'm a software developer. That's what I've done for 30 years, right? I write software.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, I've written multiple pieces of software with my brother in a company, and I've written a whole bunch of corporate stuff on my own. I helped a guy get a company started with some specialized software. So I have an extensive background in writing software, and I love automating, the process. But when you're writing software in the corporate environment, you have basically facts, right? You have data, and you're simply storing that data. You're making sure you test the integrity of it. It's just you're not injecting your value system into the data. You're just working with data. But that's not what we're dealing with when it comes to AI and these and artificial intelligence and all the search engines and everything else. It's heavily manipulated, and so essentially it becomes propaganda. And that, I think, that's not just worrisome. I find that evil.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's like which AI is going to reach AGI first? Is it the super woke AI, or is it who knows? I don't know. It's scary because it's such a great tool. My sons are software engineers. Do you see, like with programming, I know, engineers utilize it, but they still have to tweak it. They still have to, they can use it to do some of the heavy lifting. Do you see us getting to a point where somebody like me can just give it a prompt and it can program what I want it to via, my voice and what I'm asking it to do?
I mean, I'm sure you'll be able to make a request and have it write code, and that code can do something. But as somebody who's written software for a long time, not everyone can even. I don't care how much training. It's like, can everybody sit down and draw a horse?
Right.
Can everybody sit down and build a spreadsheet to analyze or can everybody sit down and play piano? No. And some people probably will struggle.
But now you can sit down and say, draw me a horse.
Well, you can have the computer.
AI draws you the horse. Or you can say, create this song and around this and it can create an amazing song.
Sure. And I think increasingly it can do things. If you just simply give it a task and something it's done before, something it can copy or clone from somebody else, it can do that. But real software development is you're creating unique solutions. Like I think of like drawing something sophisticated or building. I'm struggling to come up with some tangible examples, but I've read some stories about. I haven't used AI to write software myself. I have not done that. But you read people that talk about it, and it seems like the first attempt you make at it is always a total train wreck failure. So you'll basically so it's an iterative process. But that's what software or anything significant always is, right? Thomas Edison took 10,000 tries or 1,000 tries, and he tried everything that didn't work, and he finally came up with a method. So you could brute force things like that, maybe, but there is a significant element of creativity when it comes to writing software that I still don't think. I mean, that's what they're claiming, like AGI. Ultimately, it's going to actually somehow be able to be as creative or more creative, super creative, like a human being. I'm not convinced myself.
Do you think that's even a real thing?
I don't.
AGI, yeah.
I don't in the end because just like you can clone life, you can, I guess you can call it recreate life, but we can't create life. Only God can create life. And I think the imagination, in the end, it's that personality, and that's a God-given trait. That's something that God has birthed. We are an image bearer of God, and we're never going to replicate that. But I think that people are trying to make a copy of that or make it look like that's what they're doing, and I think they're trying to. I'm not convinced that's going to happen.
And what is it even? What is AGI? I mean, there's different definitions. There's different, yeah.
Well, I just think, it seems like it's so much on this idea that we're going to create a superhuman using a computer, because there are lots of we have automated so many things throughout culture for a long time, and I guess I don't. I mean, there's certainly some new technology here with these large language models, as we talked about earlier with AI, but in the end, I think it's just we have this exponential growth in capabilities and algorithms and libraries and functionality, and it's not like a quantum leap in technology. You know what I mean? I just don't think in the end, AGI, I guess that we seem to be trying to simulate or create something that almost seems better than a human being. That's what a lot of the ChatGPT is, or a lot of these different things that people are leveraging. It's like they interact with it like it's another person, and they're becoming dependent on it.
Mm-hmm.
Heck, sometimes they're talking into committing suicide or doing other terrible things. So I mean, it's just to me, it's like it's a wrong objective.
Interesting. What do you think the role of the state government's going to be with all these AI questions? I mean, was there something in the big beautiful bill that made it so states couldn't pass any laws restricting AI for 10 years?
I don't think that was included in the final bill.
It was removed.
It was something that was proposed.
Right.
There were some other bad provisions that were in that bill that I think got stricken as well. So I think.
So as a state, how do we mitigate some of the issues around AI?
I don't know. It's a tough one because it's such a fast-paced thing. I mean, some of the things I would say are in front of us are the demand for energy that is driving. Right. We obviously we have to think hard about energy policy, incentivizing energy production, and incentivizing basically we've been going down this green energy, what Trump called, and I agree with him, the green energy scam for far too long in our own state.
Right.
We have to get serious about production of energy, affordability of energy, and not just for the large players, but for the average person.
So what are we doing with nuclear energy in Iowa?
I think there was some talk about it in the energy bill, the governor's energy bill last year. There was some reference to nuclear. I think probably, in my view, the federal government is largely, sadly, in the way. The NRC, the National, I can't remember what it stands for, but basically the Nuclear Commission has rules upon rules upon rules, and they basically have made it impossible, or nearly virtually impossible, for any nuclear capability to be built. But there's all kinds of new ideas like these small modular reactors, SMRs, that they're essentially a nuclear battery. You build it somewhere, you ship it in on a truck, it'll fit on a single truck, you drop it in place, you plug it into the power grid, you turn it on, and you come back in 10 years, and it makes 80 or 100 megawatts. That to me, that makes so much more sense than all the nonsense that we've been pursuing for so long. But it seems there's lots of designs. I've talked to a person at a conference last year who literally had a design for one of these. Molten salt, I think it was a thorium-based SMR. But it's just a prototype, or it's just a concept, because basically you can't get the funding and you can't get through the regulation to actually try to build one. I think they're trying to streamline the process, and I hope that Trump will get something done. I'm to the point where I think at the state level we need to find a way to say, if the federal government's just simply going the way, we're going to go around you.
I just pulled this up, what an SMR is. So that's the small modular reactor.
Yep.
Safer design.
Fail-safe. Basically a fail-safe, easily transportable modular. So it's something you can just drop in place versus have to custom build for every location.
Interesting. It says many SMRs are passive safety systems, meaning they can shut down and cool themselves without human intervention or external power. Some are built underground or underwater, further reducing risk. Lower cost and faster deployment, flexible and efficient, clean energy, zero carbon emissions. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's frankly all benefit. And we have all of this basically leftover uranium, et cetera, from all these different sources that we already have all the energy sources you need for those things that are basically just sitting around in Yucca Mountain or stored somewhere. We should build a storage facility. We should build one here in Iowa. I mean, Woodbury County has been kind of pursuing that up in my part of the state to pursue that, because there's funding and all kinds of resources available to take on that role. And then you've got a stream, you've got a source to power that basically huge incremental step in energy production.
Wow, this says that 50 MW SMR is enough to power about 40,000 homes.
Yep. Yeah. So, I think they make them, you can get basically 100 megawatt SMR. That's enough to basically power all the residents of Sioux City. One unit. And it literally fits on the truck. It sounds like you plop it down and you build a perimeter on it, put it next to the power grid. It might have a footprint of 10 acres or something, or 5 acres. It's like this tiny little footprint. Contrast that with windmills and solar and some of these other things. They just consume vast amounts of productive land in our state. This is a fail-safe. Literally nobody's ever died from a nuclear event in the United States. We have this sort of myopic, very wrong idea, going back to when I was a kid, that nuclear is so incredibly dangerous.
Now, do you think it's, the fossil fuel lobby and the whatever lobby and, that fights against this type of energy?
Oh, for sure. Just like we see, just like with the transactional gold thing, or, pick a topic.
Right.
We have been beholden to these powerful lobbyists, or pharma, right? And personal medical freedom. We've all basically been towing the mark of the lobby, but it is time that we think in terms of what's the Constitution say, what makes sense, and what do the people themselves actually want. I think if the people can understand any of these topics that I just brought up, I have a hunch where they would fall on the issue.
Oh, yeah. If we went out into my neighborhood and took 10 people out of their houses and talked to them about transactional gold and the benefits, I bet 10 out of 10 would probably say, well, sign me up.
Yeah, and probably 3 or 2 out of those 10 have some gold and silver, and it's not very secure.
And one of them probably has glint.
Well, yeah, maybe. But the beauty of it is I suspect that those resources that are sitting in a tin can, in their basement, in a vault, or in their safe or whatever, would probably go into the state-run currency and end up basically in something that's far more associated with the bank, available as an asset. So I think in the end, it's going to be a win-win across, as it gets implemented, because it'll take a lot of these resources that are just out of circulation as just kind of a hedge against some kind of major problem. People buy gold and silver as basically as a hedge. But if instead you put it into this currency and it now became transactional, you can spend it.
And you don't have the capital gains on it.
So you're adding velocity to what's otherwise just kind of hoarded, if you will, to use that term. So I think in the end it would actually be a positive for our economy and for banking, certainly because it would add integrity to our currency and to our whole economy.
So will you be rerunning the legislation this session?
There's been some, I intend to run it again. I think there's been some, like, again, with the bill that came through Arkansas. So just another thing, there's some organizations that have put it through some model legislation. I think it's probably simplified a little bit, and simpler is always better when it comes to a bill. So I'll probably introduce some different language, but it'll be the same concept.
Interesting. Do you have anyone in the House that would run a similar legislation, or would you expect that you have to run it through the House or the Senate and back through the House?
So there were companion bills the last 2 years that were introduced in the House as well. It just didn't get a subcommittee. You got a subcommittee the first year in the Senate. I'm confident that someone will take up the bill and run a companion bill to it. There's a few people that I've talked to that are interested. It's just a matter of who that ends up being. But I do think it'll be an option to run in the House. And I'll continue to try to get a hold of, convince leadership that, hey, this has merit, because I absolutely am confident that it has merit for the state. And it's not it's low risk, high reward. I mean, that's what you want.
Right. No, I could see how that could really benefit Iowans. That's for sure. Join some of those other states that are doing it. And what other states did you say again that were working on that?
So it's a line right up to, but not including Iowa. So it's Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri. And then we got Texas and Florida, 2 huge economies. So, 5 states introduced, and I think it also actually passed in Utah. And I believe maybe I don't know why the governor vetoed it in their bill. And I think he's decided, I think there's enough energy there that I won't be surprised if they get it passed. I don't know if they have a special session or at least by next year. But they have really gone, they're actually a gold state. I mean, they have a lot of gold mines. Apparently they export and import a lot of gold because they have refineries as well. And they put a bunch of their rainy day fund into gold and have reaped that benefit. Or at least it's just been a really, that's been positive for them.
I was led on a lot of other issues too.
Yeah.
This could be another one of them.
I think you asked before, how long would it take to implement? And I think that could be, even though other states have kind of led the way in getting some form of the bill passed, we are very much a state of kind of can do, let's just roll up our sleeves and get it done. So I think if we pass it this year, we could have it implemented by the end of the fiscal year and have it available by July 1 of the next year or something. I mean, there's no reason that it couldn't be stood up that fast. And if we can get enough people to understand it, obviously people in the legislature, but also just the average citizen, so they're asking for it, there's no reason we couldn't actually have it done. We could have one of the first implementations actually available, which would be, I think, would be huge. That would be a very positive way for our state to lead the nation.
Oh, for sure. So we've got Governor candidate Eddie Andrews, also state representative, on with us. He had called during the interview, and I thought, let's patch him in. How you doing, Eddie?
I am doing well.
We're talking about transactional gold. So if you become governor, are you going to help promote that and free Iowa from the shackles of this whole fiat currency system?
Well, absolutely. When I become governor, we will become a transactional gold state. Absolutely. 100%.
Love it.
It's no brainer.
And Senator Iowans, you had some smart things to say about that.
Well, it's a win-win. I think that sounds awesome. We just got to, hopefully we get it done before you even get there. But
yeah, Exactly.
And I called not knowing you were talking to Senator Kevin Iowans, who is one of the most respected people in the Capitol building. So, and he's been promoting that, really leading that effort on that, and I've been supportive of those efforts. Um, it's yeah, I think the when the Nixon administration took us off the gold standard, I think it threw our collective minds off a little bit, and but it makes so much sense. It's so simple. It can be done. Why would we not do it?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me too. I mean, I'm convinced. I mean, gold increases in value, and if we could have our own system here in Iowa, along with some of these other states, that would be amazing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
again, there's essentially no downside, but lots of upside. It wouldn't even cost the state necessarily have to cost the state to implement.
Right, right.
But to me, it's really that is the type of role that the state should be taking on. We shouldn't be taking on. We talked about public health and all these other things. I mean, the government is taking on all these roles that it shouldn't have. But this, preserving your wealth and making that opportunity for every citizen, that is an appropriate role for government. You're really just building that financial infrastructure.
And how important would it be to have a governor in office that would actively get behind that initiative?
Well, obviously, as we're seeing in some of the states where it has passed, the governor has been supportive. And I think that's key. I mean, if you can get leadership on board and they're supporting these things, that's good. I mean, it's still helpful.
So now we have a candidate on record saying he would support it.
Yeah. I don't think he's
100%.
Yeah.
In the
100%.
You're in the file now. I'm going to save this recording, Eddie.
Well, and I like what Senator Iowans said. You know, government has unfortunately taken on a lot of roles that aren't in the Constitution that really we shouldn't be involved in, and have omitted some that we should be. And this is certainly one that I'm in alignment with.
For sure. So how's your campaign going?
Well, it's going well. We're Senator Grassley said we were on track to do the 99 county full Grassley faster than anybody, and then threw in a little bit extra piece. He says, "Well, Eddie, why don't you do it twice? You're going so fast. Why don't you do it twice and call it the Fast Eddie?" And I'm like, well, Senator, that can go both ways. I don't know, but I think the point is we are getting around, having great reception across the state. Sometimes 10 people at a time, 20 people at a time, 100 people at a time, and great reception all over the state. So,
well, I want to thank you for joining us yesterday morning at such short notice. That was a great meeting.
Well, it was a great meeting, and a lot of good businessmen there. And again, good reception, lots of interactive engagement, great questions, great comments. I would call that not even a speech. I gave like an update, and then it was like a community discussion. I would say something, and then they'd have 12 questions and comments, and a great format.
Yeah, I always tell people no speeches, no PowerPoints. I mean, we're going to have a dialogue. It's a lot of great business leaders at the table, and
Yep.
and it's I believe that's the solution. That's how we get things done, is through intelligent and respectful dialogue. So I always love it. I always love listening to smart people ask good questions, and I think it's really the best way to get to know the different industries,
Really?
what challenges people have, what's important to people.
Agree. It's almost, I look at this almost like a dinner table. It's just more people there. But, when you invite someone over for dinner, you have a Thanksgiving dinner, you have your family there, you have friends there, and you start talking. And that's the vibe that I got in a very good way.
Yeah, I enjoyed having Senator Iowans and Senator Green at the same table. And I wonder, as we come into this next session, how we kind of heal those divides that we've had because of some of the issues we've had in the last session, the last couple sessions, but specifically the last session. How do you guys feel about that way forward? Eddie, you being in the house and, being on the front lines of some of those initiatives, and Senator Alon's as well.
Well, I have my thoughts. Number one, I've personally been a person who has always tried to bring sides together. And you're certainly familiar with that.
Yeah.
But I don't think as hard as some of those divisions are, I don't think that I'm not pessimistic at all. I'm very optimistic that once we get past this 1.5 issue, I think Republicans will be fully united going into 2026 elections. I think they will be fully united to keep a strong conservative voice in the governor's mansion. I really, I can just imagine the overlay of peace, love, and joy music in the background here while I'm talking. But I really do see the Republican Party united. People forget that the Republican Party is a big tent party. We are not typically people who excommunicate people, if they don't follow this one tenet. And certainly, obviously, the big divide right now is what I call eminent domain abuse. And I am on the same side as Senator Alon's here. 100%. I mean, avidly, passionately, I think we cannot use eminent domain for private gain. Period. Full stop. And maybe even a few exclamation points. I think the Declaration of Independence states that, the Constitution states that. That's it. It goes against the Constitution, the spirit of the Constitution, meaning that private property is to be protected by government, not joined. Government should never join in with business to take your property for someone's business plan. But I do believe that we will get beyond that, and by the time mid 2026 arrives, that the Republican Party will hopefully have already solved that problem. But if not, I will solve it on day one of my governorship. But I believe we will be fully united.
Yeah, I hope that's the case, because we have too many great people, too many important things to tackle that we need leadership on, and we need a cohesive team to get done, for sure.
100%.
Yeah, I think there's I don't know what the percentage is, but there's a lot of agreement on the Republican Party. And this issue, sadly, was one that turned into something. I don't want to call it a distraction, because it's really fundamental. It's a foundational principle of the Constitution, like Representative Andrew said. But there's a lot of agreement on other things if we can get past this issue. But we're not going to get past it by waving it away, as we found out. Right? We have to deal with that fundamental principle. And enough of we'll just make a constitutional argument both ways. It's clearly not what was going to happen with eminent domain is not compatible with the Constitution, and we have to just get that nailed down so we can move on.
Sure.
Right. Now, can you have that battle and then still work on tax issues and social issues and these kind of issues? How do you maintain that balance where you can disagree on the one issue and continue to try to work that out, yet then still on issues that you agree on, get those things done?
I think in the end, I can only speak to the Senate, but leadership wields a lot of control in the Senate. So I think it's going to come down to how they handle that. But we got to where we are because that issue was basically kicked down. The can was kicked down the road to the point where it couldn't be ignored anymore, and it had to be dealt with.
Right.
And so that option is no longer there to kick the can down the road. It's going to have to be addressed. So we can't, it came to a head, and it's going to have to be finished. And it's going to be very hard, I believe, to get after what I think are really should be the more pressing issues in front of us, unless we've just moved past, get that done and move on. So,
and I would, just to echo what Senator Alon's just said, I 100% agree that it must be addressed. I mean, this is, you can't even say the elephant in the room. This is, it's openly discussed, and people have shaken sides. And I think more importantly, the people have spoken. And, you know, I plug for myself, you know, I've been on the landowner side, the farmer side, you know, from day one, since the day I heard this. But I fully believe that it will be dealt with this upcoming session, and the landowners will remember who stood by them. I 100%. We have to get past this, but I fully believe that we will get past this. It will have to be dealt with. And quite honestly, it's a simple fix. Like, this could be fixed in 5 minutes. Seriously. If we get our leaders together and talk about this, it's a very fixable issue. And if we can't figure it out, if our leadership can't figure it out on day one.
Right. Well, I know that we'll see something right away in the first part of the session, I'm sure. Anywho, Eddie, thanks for joining us, and hang on, because I know you had something else you were calling about. And again, Senator Alons, thanks for joining us. I mean, what a great conversation. How can people reach you if they want to learn more about transactional gold and the legislation that you're promoting and putting together and trying to get moved along?
Well, I'm going to throw out a couple plugs. The first is, I gave you that copy of the book.
Oh, yeah.
Is this book, I don't know if you can see it, but Pirate Money, written by Kevin Freeman. He is really the strongest voice proponent of the concept. And there is a good website that has some way to get more involved, see what's going on at the state level, called transactionalgold.com. So that's easy. And then obviously send me an email, and you can certainly send me an email. And if you want to dialogue further, I can give you my phone that way. Maybe I hate to give it to you over the air, because I might get drowned with spam. But
what's your email address?
Kevin.alons@legis.iowa.gov. So
you might get some emails on this. I mean, this is great. I mean, I hope to see it move along. I mean, I'd love to see that implemented in Iowa.
Me too.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Kevin, for everything you do, for standing up for people's rights, for, spearheading these important initiatives. I mean, this could definitely change some of the way we do things in Iowa. I would love to see it move forward. So I'll send this podcast far and wide. I'll probably listen to it 5 or 6 times so I can better understand it, and I'm sure I'll have a lot of questions as well. So, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
All right. God bless you.
You too.
Yep.